This is my problem to solve, an anti-racist learning session. Now, the topic today is that it's not bad to be racist. But before you think any harder about that, it's definitely not good either. Now, I'm white, and the reason I decided to call this series My Problem to Solve is because it's my belief that this is a white problem. This was created by and upheld, continues to be upheld by white people like me. And I need to do some hard work to try to tear down the walls and the systems of white supremacy. I believe I do this by listening to BIPOC voices and amplifying them. So I seek out BIPOC voices who have chosen to speak, because I do not expect Black, Indigenous, people of color to speak on this topic because they live it every day. So again, and BIPOC, for those of you that don't know, is a term that means Black, Indigenous, people of color. And it's a relatively new term. And if you're like me, when I first heard it, I thought, well, why Black and Indigenous aren't Black and Indigenous people of color? Why are we othering them? Yes, they are people of color, but the term BIPOC acknowledges that Black and Indigenous people have very different experiences unique to their races. So that's why we don't loop them all together. All right, let's move right through. Now, I'm hoping to keep this to 30 minutes, and I'm hoping that by the end of this 30 minutes, you'll understand the depth of this problem of white supremacy, of racism. You'll orient to your beliefs. You'll adjust your view of the racism binary and consider some action. That's a lot to do in 30 minutes, so let's get right to it. So what is the problem? Now, this is a timeline that was put together by a sociologist named Joe Fegan. And looking at this timeline, he highlights a few important dates. I'll include a link that pulls apart this timeline a little bit more, but what you need to know right now is that roughly 400 years ago, 401 to be exact, in 1619, the first Africans that were kidnapped for slavery arrived here on this land. This timeline depicts the United States history since the English colonization, because there's a lot of history before European settlers came and ripped it apart. What this timeline shows is that Black people specifically have been systemically and legally oppressed and marginalized for a long time. Our history doesn't just dissipate like that. In fact, it wasn't until the last 12% of this timeline that the United States became a true democracy where everyone did have a voice, because only that recently were Black people given the right to vote, right? And it will be into the next century before our Black citizens were free, as long as they were enslaved. I won't read the quote to you because it is better etiquette for a speaker to allow what's on the screen to be read by the participants. All right, we're going to do a little opening activity here to get your brain moving a little bit. Now, I understand this is a recording, so it's very possible for you to cheat, but I urge you not to. You've come this far to view this, so please take the opportunity. Now, I'm going to ask you to write. If you don't have a pen and paper, you could pause the video and type into your phone. Either open up an email that you won't send that you can type into, a Google Doc, a notepad, a text message, and type it out. If you're not gonna do that, if you're gonna cheat, at least take the time to stop and think. Now, what I'd like you to do is write down this heading. Now, this activity was created for university students for that grade level, and it was created so that beliefs can be determined. So, it's 2 steps. First step, write down on the top of the paper 5 things I did yesterday. Now I want you to pause this video and write down 5 things that you did yesterday. Just whatever comes to mind, whatever stands out as most mentionable for what you did yesterday. Go ahead and pause. All right, now if you didn't pause or you didn't write or you didn't take the time to think, this is me calling you out for cheating. Okay, so you've got your 5 things that you did yesterday. Now set that aside, and on the next piece of paper or further down the line, create a second heading, 5 things I believe in. This could be related to laws, could be related to spirituality, could be related to the way you treat people, could be related to the way you eat, whatever. 5 things that you feel like stand out at this moment for what you believe in. Pause and go. Okay. Now that you've got both of your lists, I want you to take the list of 5 things that you believe in and cross it out. Put a big X through it. All right. Now, I want you to take the heading that says 5 things I did yesterday, cross that out, and replace it with this new title, 5 things I believe in. This activity was not created by Robin DiAngelo, who we're going to speak about today, but it definitely fits in. We must align what we profess to believe in with how we actually behave in the world. Now, I know I just broke the rule of best practice and I read what was on the screen, but I guess I wanted to emphasize it. So, Robin DiAngelo, she is the author of White Fragility. She's a white author speaking to white people. So when she refers to the term us in the book, she's referring to the group of white people. Now, what white fragility is it's this phenomenon of discomfort and defensiveness on the part of white people. And it's when we're confronted with our own racism, something we may have done that contributed to racism. And what it means by fragile is how little it takes to unravel us. Now, white fragility operates as a form of bullying to stop discussion, to stop learning around racism, and to basically say, stop, you're calling me a bad person. Now let's dig into that a little bit. But first, a little whiteness disclaimer for you. Now, when I first read the book of White Fragility, I had to acknowledge that what she said about white people also included me. Just like it says here, how whiteness can, the idea of whiteness meaning something will cause umbrage, where white people want to say, well, wait a minute, don't group me in with them. Don't group me in as just another white person. I'm not a white person. Even though we often will think thoughts about other racial groups, right? So recognize that this is a hurdle for you. Gently step over that hurdle. And now let's continue on down the road. Now, I talked a little bit about how white fragility is a form of bullying. The whole purpose here is that, excuse me, by creating emotion around our fragility at being called out, what we're doing is stealing the attention away from the transgression that we just produced, and we're taking the attention onto our emotional reaction. So it readjusts the transgression. It's no longer my racism, which was innocent. I didn't mean anything by it. And instead the transgression is you for thinking I'm a bad person. Now I keep saying this bad person, so let's take a look at that. I want you to look at the lists here. Now, the good-bad binary is the main piece of what we're discussing today. It's a belief system that our society at large has adopted. We subscribe to this ideology pretty much by saying that people who are racist are bad, and these are some of the stereotypes we think would be included in being a bad person or a racist. And then we think that being not racist is good. The problem with this is once we've decided that once I have decided I'm a good person, I've already put myself on the side of the screen that says a good person and not racist. And therefore, there's nothing else required of me. I'm a good person. So what I did was not racist because I'm not racist. Now, Elliot Williams, who's a legal analyst, talked a little bit about this in an article he wrote recently, where he talks about the deep fear that white people have towards being called racist. We see it as the absolute worst, most vile thing that you could call a person, right? This line of thinking seems to be that if being racist is an unforgivable sin, happening to do an occasional racist thing can be immediately forgiven by one's simply not being racist, right? But this disregards the notion that more often in matters of race, it's the consequences or the impact and not the intent that cause the hurt. And also this attitude is related to the debate about what is and is not racist. And somebody who's called the N-word should be able to be in a position to decide what is racist. But instead, often white people decide what is and is not racist. For example, let's take a look here. We have Amy Cooper, who the very day or the day before George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis, she called the police on a black man in New York City. Lied about what was occurring, saying she was being threatened, but it was her white fragility speaking, because she was instead falling apart, emoting wildly as a result of his asking her to leash her dog. So she called the police. As a side note, many people went on to say that she knew exactly what she was doing and weaponized the police against Christian Cooper, who she called the police on. And on the other side here, we have Michael Richards, who infamously a few years ago said these terms that are here on the picture during a racist tirade to a couple of black men, paid audience members of his, that he called the N-word repeatedly. Now, in both these cases, Amy Cooper and Michael Richards, who are just two of an uncountable number of cases, both of them declared publicly afterwards that they are not racist. Because the good-bad binary, that line of thinking, that ideology says that a person can't be a good person and also be racist. It's also saying, if I'm not racist, I got no work to do because I'm not racist. I'm not part of the problem, right? Let's move on. So these ideologies behind the good-bad binary, they come out of, they often rely on two waves of thinking: colorblind and color celebrate. Now I'm going to read through a list that's also going to be on the screen for what this looks like. So if somebody is subscribing to a colorblind ideology, what they're saying is that race has no meaning to them. I was taught to treat everyone the same, so I'm not racist. I don't see color, so I'm not racist. I don't care if you're pink, purple, polka dotted, it's all the same to me. I'm not racist. My parents were or weren't racist, So that is why I'm not racist. Or she just happens to be black, but that has nothing to do with what I'm about to say about her because I'm not racist. Or focusing on race is what divides us. We need to unify because we're not racist. If people respect me, I respect them regardless of race. I'm not racist. I was picked on because I was white or because I grew up poor. So I don't have privilege. So I'm not racist. So these are all colorblind types of statements. Now let's look at the opposite. Color celebrate. A color celebrate statement claims to value diversity. Because I appreciate different skin colors and different races, I'm not racist. So some of these statements, oh, I work in a very diverse environment, so I'm not racist. I have people of color in my family. I married a BIPOC person. I have BIPOC children. I adopted children from Africa. You saying I don't love my children? I'm not racist. I used to live in New York or Hawaii or some other place very diverse, so I'm not racist. Or we don't like how white our neighborhood is, but we had to move here for the schools. So I'm not racist. I marched in the 60s, or I went to that Black Lives Matter protest last week. I'm not racist. I went on a mission to Africa. I grew up in a very diverse school or neighborhood. I studied in Japan, and there I was the minority, so I know what it's like. Therefore, I'm not racist. All of these terms, or all of these statements, and both these opposites, think about that, colorblind and its opposite, color celebrate, they both operate under that good-bad binary. Now, what she says in the book is it doesn't matter if these statements are true. I'm sure you did adopt children from Africa. In fact, I know you did because I see them in your Christmas card every year. The truth is not what's relevant. What is relevant is how do these statements function? Okay, so if somebody tells a joke at work and it's racist, and you laugh and you move on, and I call you out later and say, you laughed at that joke. Let's talk about that. And you respond with, oh, I'm not racist. I married a black woman, and so I'm not racist. How's that statement functioning? It functions to shut down the conversation. It exempts you from responsibility to the problem. It exempts you from participation in white supremacy or racism, and it's over. Conversation over. The problem here, again, is with the good-bad binary. I'm just trying to be a good person, and I know I am, so there's no way I'm racist. So returning to Amy Cooper and Michael Richards, are they racist? Now, I'm going to out my own opinion here in a couple of ways. One, I don't really like the term racist, and I really don't like the term a racist. You know, we've heard it in, I've heard reporters in briefings with the president say, Mr. President, are you a racist? And of course, we know he says, I'm the least racist person you've ever seen. Now, here's what I don't like about it, is it's similar binary again. Now, another book by Ibram X. Kendi, in this he likens racist to being a name tag that we can rip off our shirt and put back on. Likewise, we can take an anti-racist name tag, rip that off and on, because at different times we are being racist and different times we're being anti-racist. So thinking of it that way, it's not a binary. I'm not one. It's fluid. So again, Amy Cooper and Michael Richards, are they racist? You might reasonably say no. I would say yes. But even greater than calling them racist, or even more accurate, would be to say they participated in racism. And on that, I would hope we could agree. So along with the color celebrate and the colorblind statements being problematic, here you're looking at a picture of Gary Young, who's a black man and a reporter for The Guardian. He's interviewing someone named Richard Spencer. Richard Spencer is a white nationalist, and he happened to organize the Unite the Right riots, or march, whatever you want to call it, in Charlottesville a few years ago. Now, obviously, this white nationalist can have proximity to a black man. So even if some of the most racist people can have proximity, any of us can, and it doesn't prove that we are immune to racism. Similarly, what Robin DiAngelo would say in the book is being married to a person of color doesn't free you from racism, or having kids or coworkers that are people of color, in the same way that when a man marries a woman, all of his sexism doesn't immediately evaporate when those vows are completed, right? He doesn't become the perfect feminist because he's now married to a woman. So we must continue to ask how our racism manifests, not if. So don't ask if I contribute to racism, ask how. I'm sitting here right now telling you that I've read many books, watched many conversations with many dear people, and I contribute to racism. Unfortunately, it's probably on a daily basis because I contribute in ways I don't even know about. I'm going to read to you a short section, paragraph from White Fragility that fits in with this page, with this slide. In my workshops, says Robin DiAngelo, I often ask people of color, how often have you given white people feedback on our unaware yet inevitable racism? How often has that gone well for you? Eye rolling, head shaking, and outright laughter follow, along with the consensus of rarely, if ever. I then ask, what would it be like if you could simply give us feedback, have us graciously receive it, reflect, and work to change the behavior? Recently, a man of color sighed and said, it would be revolutionary. I ask my fellow whites to consider the profundity of that response. It would be revolutionary if we could receive, reflect, and work to change the behavior. On the one hand, the man's response points to how difficult and fragile we are. But on the other hand, it indicates how simple it can be to take responsibility for our racism. However, we aren't likely to get there if we are operating from the dominant worldview that only intentionally mean people can participate in racism. Don't ask if, ask how. So on that note, I invite you to put on that anti-racist name tag whenever you can. And it's a journey, let me tell you. I remember when I first really committed to the anti-racism work, I thought it's gonna be tough, but I'm gonna climb that mountain and I'm gonna get to the top and it's gonna feel good. Well, I'll tell you what, I did climb that abstract mountain. I did get to the top and it did feel good, but guess what? As soon as I got to the top of that peak, I looked and all I could see, as far as I could look in every direction, was just this huge mountain range, up and down and up and down, seemingly going on forever. And I've been climbing through that mountain range up and down ever since. It doesn't end. So I invite you to read, to journal, because it's shown that if I think about the time that I laughed at that racist joke and walked away, that's okay. If I journal about it and really dig deep into what that was like, now I'm going to get somewhere and get some movement. I invite you to watch and reflect. Netflix has created their Black Lives Matter collection on there, so there's really no excuse not to be able to see some of that stuff. We've all seen 13th on Netflix. If we haven't, you should have by now. So going deeper than 13th, there's Time, the Khalif Browder story, which is very moving and very eye-opening if you're a white person and not having those experiences. LA 92 depicts just what happened in 1992 in LA. An ACT, I'm going to volunteer myself. Now, by the way, all of the links in this slideshow, I'm putting as links down below in the video. I'm inviting you to put this accountability form where you really quickly can just write down your name, what you want to do to ACT, and when you want to do it by. And I'm volunteering to be a thought partner. I'll reach out to you to see how you did. And by doing so, I get to grow too. I get to climb further up my mountain. And then once you've done what you committed to, we can say, nailed it. Here's some additional viewing. This reverse racism clip is great. It really quickly, and because he's a comedian, in a humorous way, sums up that timeline that we looked at the beginning. And this MTV News clip is pretty much a racism 101. It's the very basics about racism. And I'll leave you with this quote. And I'll say thank you very much for being here and viewing this, because you wore that anti-racism name tag by choosing to learn something new. Thank you.